In 2008, millions rushed banks only to see "limit reached" flash on screens. Lehman Brothers collapsed with $600 billion in debt, the biggest bankruptcy in U.S. history. Families with hidden cash survived. But how did some see the collapse coming when everyone else was blind? The day the banks froze, could you get your money back? The morning of September 15, 2008, New Yorkers woke up to a nightmare headline. Lehman Brothers had collapsed. 158 years of banking history gone in a single night. It wasn't just numbers on Wall Street. It was retirement funds, life savings, and paychecks evaporating. Lehman had $600 billion in debt when it fell, the largest bankruptcy in American history. Within hours, people rushed to ATMs. And here's the part most forget. Some machines flashed "limit reached." Cash was rationed. A few banks even capped daily withdrawals to $300 to $500, fearing a modern bank run. Imagine standing in line outside, gripping your debit card, while rumors spread that even Bank of America might fail next. But here's the twist. Some families weren't panicking. They had already pulled cash weeks earlier. Why? Because they smelled the smoke before the fire. In August 2007, just over a year before the full meltdown, two Bear Stearns hedge funds collapsed from toxic mortgage bets. Savvy savers took it as a warning. By late 2007, the FDIC reported that over $300 billion had quietly shifted into short-term treasury bills, the safest thing next to cash. And yet, millions missed the signal. One Ohio teacher told reporters, "I had $80,000 in my account Monday. By Friday, the branch was locked." She never saw that money again. It vanished with the bank. It raises a chilling question. What gave some people the foresight to pull their savings, while others trusted the system until it was too late? Because the real collapse wasn't just about failing banks. It was about failing trust. And that trust would shatter even further once families realized their homes weren't safe either. If your home lost half its value overnight, would you walk away or fight to stay? Imagine this. You bought a house in 2006 for $250,000. By 2009, that same home was worth barely $120,000. Millions of families woke up trapped in a nightmare called being underwater, owing more on their mortgage than the house itself was worth. From 2007 to 2014, over 6 million American homes went into foreclosure. Entire neighborhoods in places like Las Vegas, Phoenix, and parts of Florida became ghost towns. Drive down a street in Nevada in 2009, and every third house had boarded windows, dead grass, or a bank-owned sign hammered into the lawn. Families split in how they reacted. Some fought to stay, renegotiating with banks through government programs like HAMP, Home Affordable Modification Program, which promised lower payments, but often delivered endless paperwork and rejections. Others simply walked away, mailing the keys back to the bank in what became known as a jingle mail. But here's a brutal truth. Choosing wrong often tore families apart. Divorce rates in foreclosure-heavy states like Nevada spiked by over 15% during the crisis. Couples who managed to stay together often did it by moving in with relatives, doubling up in small apartments, or even sleeping in cars, while saving every dime to rebuild. And then there were the quiet survivors, people who rented out rooms, bartered handyman work for rent breaks, or even grew backyard gardens to stretch pennies. In Detroit, One family traded carpentry services for 6 months of mortgage extensions. In California, a woman bartered weekly house cleaning for a spare room after losing her home. So the question hung heavy in every living room. Do you stay chained to debt or walk away to start over? For millions, neither choice felt like winning. And just as people were losing their homes, another storm hit. Jobs themselves started to disappear, forcing teachers to drive taxis and bankers to flip burgers. When jobs disappeared, why did some families earn cash while others starved? By 2009, the U.S. unemployment rate hit 10%, the highest in decades. But those numbers hid how brutal it was in some places. In Detroit, joblessness climbed above 25%, and entire auto plants closed. Las Vegas saw construction collapse overnight, leaving thousands of men standing outside Home Depot parking lots each morning, waiting to be picked for day labor. Here's the picture. A teacher in Florida lost her job and started driving a taxi. A former banker in New York flipped burgers at McDonald's. College graduates sold blood plasma for gas money. And teenagers? Many were suddenly the main breadwinners, shining shoes, babysitting, mowing lawns, whatever brought a few dollars home. But then came the stories of reinvention. Families who didn't freeze, but hustled. Etsy shops exploded. Handmade jewelry, knitted scarves, even soap made in kitchen sinks. Some of those little side hustles grew into six-figure businesses by 2015. Food trucks, once a rarity, boomed during the recession because people couldn't afford sit-down restaurants. Craigslist became a lifeline for odd jobs, from painting fences to fixing old computers. One study found that by 2010, over 40% of unemployed Americans reported trying some form of self-employment or gig work. That's desperation turned into invention. Yet the gap was harsh. Those who adapted, who found new ways to earn even a trickle, survived with dignity. Those who waited for old jobs to return often starved or lost everything. One Ohio father of 3 later said, "I learned you can't wait for the job market." You have to invent your own paycheck. And that leads to a haunting question. Why did some families have the mindset to improvise, while others clung to old habits? The answer often came from something deeper, lessons passed down from grandparents who lived through the Great Depression. Why did Grandma's Depression lessons matter more than Wall Street advice? Picture 2008. Wall Street brokers are shouting. Banks are burning through billions. And CNBC experts are predicting the end of capitalism. Yet, in small towns and quiet suburbs, survival looked very different. Families weren't calling stockbrokers, they were calling Grandma. Why? Because she had lived through the 1930s, when a pound of flour was more valuable than a stock tip. In the crash, people suddenly remembered how their grandparents had stretched pennies. Canning vegetables became trendy again. By 2009, sales of home canning supplies jumped 30% nationwide, according to Ball, the iconic mason jar company. Sewing machines, which many thought were relics, started selling out at second-hand stores. One survey found that nearly 25% of households reported sewing or mending clothes to save money during the Great Recession. Families who listened to those Depression-era voices often did far better. A grandmother's advice to pay cash or don't buy it at all protected households from the credit trap that buried millions in debt. Others taught younger generations to plant victory gardens, just like in World War II. By 2011, an estimated 1/3 of American households grew some of their own food. saving hundreds of dollars a year. Meanwhile, neighbors who ignored those lessons? They maxed out credit cards, trusted quick Wall Street rebounds, or bought on speculation. Many of them sank. Here's a haunting detail. In 2009, pawn shops reported record business. Jewelry, tools, even family heirlooms were traded for grocery money. But the families who had stocked jars of beans in their basement or cash in an envelope didn't need to pawn wedding rings. So here's the real question. Why did the old-fashioned survival hacks, mocked in the 90s, suddenly become lifelines in the 2000s? And if history repeats, would you know how to use them? What did the coupon kings and queens know that the rest missed? Imagine walking into a grocery store with $50 and leaving with $300 worth of food. That wasn't a fantasy in 2008. It was the reality for America's coupon kings and queens. During the recession, coupon use exploded. According to Nielsen, coupon redemption jumped 23% between 2008 and 2009, the sharpest rise in decades. By 2010, Americans clipped and scanned over 3.3 billion coupons, saving families more than $3 billion in 1 year. Here's what most people forget. This wasn't just saving pocket change. For some households, shaving $200 off the monthly grocery bill was the difference between paying the light bill or living in darkness. A single mother in Ohio became famous in local news for filling her garage with shelves of toothpaste, cereal, and canned soup, all bought for pennies with stacked coupons. She later sold her extras on eBay, essentially running a small black market grocery out of her home. And yet, most Americans ignored it. Why? Many thought couponing was embarrassing, old-fashioned, or a waste of time. They'd rather swipe a credit card, even if it meant piling on debt. But the insiders, the disciplined ones, quietly built pantries so full that neighbors knocked during shortages. Here's a jaw-dropper. The U.S. Department of Agriculture estimated that by 2009, families who seriously couponed could save up to 30% of annual food costs. In today's numbers, that's thousands of dollars. So ask yourself, in a crisis, would you laugh at a coupon or would you treat it like currency? Because back then, the people who treated them like cash didn't just eat better, they survived longer. And speaking of survival, what about those who weren't clipping coupons, but instead working in the shadows of the economy? That's where we head next. Was the black market the real bailout? Picture this. Wall Street was melting down. Banks were hoarding money, and official jobs were disappearing. Yet in backyards, garages, and Craigslist forums, a second economy was booming, one that didn't show up in government reports. Historians estimate that by 2009, nearly 1 in 5 Americans earned part of their income through informal, cash-based work. Babysitting, lawn care, car repairs, tutoring, cleaning, pet sitting, you name it. Someone was hustling for cash under the radar. Craigslist, which had already revolutionized classifieds, became the backbone of this shadow economy. Want your driveway shoveled? $20 cash? Need a handyman? Pay in bills, no receipts. Pawn shops also thrived. Between 2007 and 2009, pawn transactions increased by nearly 30% nationwide, according to the National Pawnbrokers Association. Wedding rings, family heirlooms, even children's game consoles were traded for quick cash. At one Dallas pawn shop, the owner admitted that by 2009, half of his customers were new faces, families who who had never pawned a thing before. Gold buyers boomed too. Cash for gold signs popped up on every corner, fueled by gold's meteoric rise from around $650 an ounce in 2007 to over $1,000 by 2009. Families literally melted jewelry to pay heating bills. But here's the striking part. These unofficial earnings often made the difference between foreclosure and survival. In Phoenix, some laid-off construction workers took side jobs fixing neighbors' roofs for cash, while in Florida, teachers who lost hours began tutoring kids at kitchen tables. None of this was reported, but it was real, and it kept families afloat. So while Washington argued over bailouts, Main Street quietly built its own. But here's the bigger question. What about the families who didn't just survive, but got rich during the crisis? How did they manage to buy when everyone else was selling? That's where we're going next. War bonds? No crash bonds. How families invested when Wall Street burned. Imagine this. Wall Street has just vaporized $8 trillion in household wealth. Retirement funds are halved. Stocks that once felt untouchable, General Electric, Citigroup, Bank of America, are trading for pennies compared to just a year earlier. Most Americans pulled back, hoarding cash and praying not to lose more. But a few contrarians, they doubled down. Between 2008 and 2009, the Dow Jones lost nearly 54% of its value, one of the steepest collapses in U.S. history. Yet people who bought at the bottom made once-in-a-lifetime gains. Take Ford Motor Company. In November 2008, shares traded under $2. By 2010, they were worth nearly $14, a 600% increase. Families who scraped together even $500 and took that gamble suddenly had several months' worth of income. And it wasn't just stocks. Housing, which seemed like a nightmare, became a bargain hunter's dream. In places like Phoenix and Las Vegas, foreclosed homes were auctioned off for as little as $30,000. One Nevada couple, who had saved cash from running a small catering business, bought 3 foreclosures in 2009. By 2015, those homes had tripled in value, and rental income carried them into early retirement. Even small businesses became opportunities. With credit frozen, countless mom-and-pop shops closed. But those with cash or courage could buy equipment dirt cheap. In Ohio, a laid-off factory worker bought used sewing machines from a shuttered plant for $800. Within 2 years, he was running a custom upholstery business that supported his whole family. So here's the uncomfortable truth. Fear made most people freeze. But a tiny minority looked at the chaos and saw clearance tags on everything. They became millionaires, not because times were good, but because they bought when everyone else was selling. But that raises the final, haunting question. If the next crash comes, do you know whether you'd panic or pounce? Could you survive the next crash without a bailout? Picture 2009. Whole neighborhoods in California and Florida stood empty, windows boarded, lawns overgrown. At the peak, more than 10,000 homes a day were being foreclosed nationwide. Yet at the same time, farmers markets, swap meets, and church food pantries overflowed, not with abundance, but with desperate families trading, hustling, and scraping to get by. What actually kept people alive wasn't government bailouts or Wall Street rescue packages. It was the unglamorous, gritty basics: a cash buffer, skills you could trade, neighbors who had your back, families who had just $1,000 in emergency savings avoided eviction. Those who could fix cars, sew clothes, or grow vegetables turned survival into an advantage. By 2010, unemployment hovered around 9.8%, the highest in decades. But even then, underground economies thrived. Craigslist swaps surged, pawn shops made record profits, and food banks reported demand up by 46% compared to pre-crash years. These weren't statistics, they were lifelines. One woman in Michigan bartered baked bread for childcare. Another in Nevada traded home haircuts for gas money. These tiny exchanges kept families afloat when cash disappeared. And here's something almost no one talks about. Millions relied on community defense networks. In Chicago, neighborhoods formed foreclosure block clubs to physically stop sheriffs from evicting families. In Phoenix, groups of laid-off construction workers pooled money to buy tools and take small private jobs together. Cooperation wasn't optional, it was survival. So, the haunting question remains: if the next crash hits, and some economists warn it could be worse than 2008, are you ready to last 30 days without your job, your credit cards, or your bank? Because history shows one thing clearly: bailouts save banks, not families. Families save themselves. History doesn't just repeat, it warns. The 2008 crash left scars, but the survivors left clues. If the next downturn hits, would you know what to do? Watch our other deep dives and subscribe to never miss the next survival story.